This man recorded his own voice, calling him from the future. Same tone, same accent, same breathing. And the message he received changes everything. What you're about to hear is a story that blurs the line between science fiction and terrifying reality. A case that has baffled investigators and audio experts for nearly 2 decades. It all starts with a simple audio recorder, a man named David Rowan, and a message that should have been impossible. In 2003, David Rowan, a meticulous and highly respected radio technician, had a routine habit. Every night before leaving his workshop, he would set up a high-fidelity audio recorder. He wasn't looking for anything specific. It was more of a professional tick, a way to test equipment and monitor the ambient noise of his workspace. He always expected to hear the same things: the low hum of the servers, the distant rumble of a passing train, maybe the creak of the old building settling. He expected silence. But one morning, when he played back the tape, the silence was broken. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the device captured a phone call. It wasn't an external call picked up by the microphone. The recorder was wired directly into his personal work line, meaning the signal was routed internally. The voice on the other end of that line sent a chill down David's spine. It was his own, but it wasn't right. This voice was older, much older. It was rough, gravelly, as if it had been strained by years of hardship. The speech was slower, more deliberate, each word heavy with a sense of exhaustion and urgency. And what it said was just 2 words, a simple, terrifying command. David, get out now. David was a man of logic and reason. His first thought was a prank. It had to be. His coworkers were known for their elaborate jokes, and with his expertise in audio, faking his voice was theoretically possible, though difficult. He played the message again and again. The more he listened, the less it felt like a joke. There was a raw, genuine fear in that voice that you just couldn't fake. The slight waver, the ragged intake of breath between words, it was all too real. It was his voice, but a version of himself he had never met, a version that was in deep, deep trouble. Determined to get to the bottom of it, David took the recording to a forensic audio analysis lab, friends of his in the industry. He presented it as a hypothetical case, a professional curiosity. He didn't want anyone thinking he was losing his mind. The analysts were intrigued. They ran the sample through every test in their arsenal, from spectrographic analysis to biometric vocal print matching. The results that came back weren't just surprising, they weren't impossible. The forensic report was unequivocal. The vocal tone, the unique frequency and resonance of the voice, was a perfect match to David's own voice print. The breath patterns, the minute, subconscious ways a person inhales and exhales while speaking, were identical to his. Even the speech rhythm, the specific cadence and pacing of his sentences, was a mirror image. The audio waveform, the very digital fingerprint of the sound, aligned perfectly with recordings of David's own speech. But there was one glaring anomaly. The entire recording was 22% slower. This wasn't a case of someone digitally slowing down a recording. It would have distorted the pitch. Instead, the analysis was consistent with the natural physiological effects of aging on the human vocal cords, slowing and deepening of speech. It was the voice of a man decades older. When David shared the results with his coworkers, their jokes and laughter quickly faded. They saw the look on his face, the raw data on the screen. This wasn't a prank. They helped him check the phone logs, the internal routing systems. There was no record of the call. It was as if it had materialized out of thin air, directly onto his line. The atmosphere in the workshop shifted from playful to tense. Everyone felt it. Something was deeply wrong. David tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation, but there was none. He went home that night with a gnawing sense of dread, a feeling that he was being watched. He was right. The worst was yet to come. 3 days later, the feeling of dread had only intensified. David couldn't sleep, found himself replaying the 2-word message in his head over and over. Get out now. Get out of where? The workshop. His life. He decided to leave the recorder running again, hoping against hope that it was a one-time fluke. One. The next morning, he found another message. This one was recorded at 2:04 a.m. The same voice. His voice, but older, more desperate now, filled with a terrifying mix of anger and despair. This time, the message was longer. You didn't listen. The words hung in the air, a chilling accusation from his own future. Damned! But as the analysts examined this new recording, they discovered something even more disturbing. Buried deep within the audio frequencies, almost perfectly masked by the main voice, was another sound. It wasn't background noise, it was another voice, overlapping with the first, trying to speak at the same time. It was a faint, dry whisper, barely audible. They had to isolate and amplify it dozens of times to make it out. The whispered words were, "He's watching. Who was he? Was it a warning from his future self about a third party? Or was there someone with him when he made that call from the future?" The mystery deepened, spiraling into something far more sinister than a simple temporal paradox. The call was no longer just a warning. It was a scene from a future horror, and David was the main character. The question was no longer just where the call came from, but who or what was on the other end with his future self. But before I tell you where the call was traced to, you need to hear what David saw on his security camera that same night. That night, after discovering the second message, David couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The whispered words, "He's watching," echoed in his mind. Back at the workshop, he was haunted by every creak and groan of the old building. Then he heard a distinct noise from the main workshop floor. A scrape, like a chair being dragged across concrete. But he was the only one there. His heart pounding, David pulled up the live feed from the workshop CCTV cameras on his office monitor. At first, the footage showed exactly what he expected. His workshop empty and silent, illuminated by the dim glow of the emergency lights. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. He scanned the frame, his eyes darting into every corner, every shadow. Then the lights began to flicker, not randomly, but in a strange, rhythmic pulse. The screen went dark for a second, then came back. In that brief moment of darkness, something had changed. A shadow, long and distorted, was stretching across the floor from just out of frame. It moved unnaturally, elongating and twisting, as if it had a life of its own. It crawled across the concrete until it touched the leg of the workbench where the audio recorder sat. And then as the lights flickered one more time, a figure materialized beside it. It was a man, standing perfectly still, his back to the camera. His shoulders were stooped, his posture weary. He was wearing the same kind of work jacket and jeans that David himself often wore. As the figure slowly turned, David felt the air leave his lungs. The man was him, an older, weathered version of himself, his face etched with lines of grief and terror. It was the face that belonged to the voice on the recorder. Then, in the split second, between one video frame and the next, the figure simply vanished. He was there, and then he was gone. David was now faced with undeniable, terrifying proof. He had seen his future self, and his future self was haunted. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture they were forming was one of incomprehensible horror. The calls, the warnings, the spectral figure on the CCTV IT, all pointed to a future he was apparently destined to run from. Desperate for answers, he and his colleagues redoubled their efforts, contacting the phone company with a high-priority request to trace the origin of the impossible calls. The report from the phone company's top engineers was the final nail in the coffin of David's sanity. They had managed to trace the signal. The logs confirmed that the call did, in fact, originate from David's own phone number. It was a closed loop, call from his number to his number. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The signal itself, the electronic pulse that carried the call, was routed through a specific cellular tower. A tower that had been decommissioned and physically dismantled in 1998. The line hadn't been active in 5 years. According to every law of physics and telecommunications, that call should not have been able to connect. It was a ghost signal, a voice from a dead line, broadcasting a message from a future that seemed to be collapsing in on itself. There was no logical explanation. No faulty wiring, no crossed signals, no clever hack. It was, for all intents and purposes, a call from outside of time. 1 month after the first recording, David Rowan vanished. He left his apartment unlocked, his car in the driveway, his wallet on the kitchen counter. He didn't show up for work. He didn't call his family. Extensive police searches turned up nothing. It was as if he had just ceased to exist. His case file remains open, a cold case gathering dust in a police archive. But the story doesn't end there. Every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, a new voicemail appears in his still active inbox. Friends and family who maintain the account have shared this with a select few investigators. The message is always short, and it's always in David's voice, that same aged, terrified voice from the original recordings. For years, the messages were fragments, pleas, warnings. But the latest one, the one that arrived just a few months ago, was different. It was calm, resigned, and it wasn't a warning for him anymore. It was a single, chilling sentence. It said, "You're next." So what do you think happened to David Rowan? Did he escape his fate, or did he become the ghost that haunted him? Was he warning himself, or was he luring himself into a trap set by something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you found this story as unsettling as I did, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Thanks for watching.